We all know that the federal government is bloated, but of course the problem with this is once employees are hired by the federal government, it's basically impossible to remove them, unless of course you're the president like Donald Trump has shown. And what we're going to see today, of course, is the Democrats trying to stop accountability from happening and Brandon Gill totally destroying Representative Lynch on this exact same topic. So before we begin, don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe on this video so we can break through the algorithms. Here we go.
Given that H.R. 5750 would arbitrarily and without any meaningful study extend the standard probationary period for most new federal employees from 1 to 2 years, this amendment would strike this misguided legislation in its entirety. My amendment would also replace the text of the underlying bill with a common sense requirement that the Independent Government Accountability Office, which is the main watchdog of the federal government, must first review the impact of prior extensions of probationary periods at the Department of Defense. We've done this before, not only at DOD, but also the United States Postal Service. And both of those experiences have been cautionary in terms of our ability to compete with the private sector and the consequences of losing so many good employees.
Chair recognizes Mr. Gill from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too oppose this amendment and urge my colleagues to support the underlying bill. Listen, this is a very common sense piece of legislation that simply says that we're going to have a 2-year probationary period for federal workers, during which time we can evaluate them and their managers can determine whether their employment for the federal government makes sense for American taxpayers. We hear that unions are opposed to this, and that's no surprise to anybody. But the reality is that we represent the American people whose tax dollars we are stewarding, not union bosses who are engaged in collective bargaining against the American taxpayer. Once federal workers are outside of this probationary period, they receive virtual tenure. They're incredibly difficult to fire or to get rid of. And the purpose of their employment is to serve the American people, to make federal services better. Our federal programs are not intended to be jobs programs for substandard government workers. So I urge my colleagues to support this common sense bill to ensure that federal workers are in fact meeting basic standards of competency, giving more discretion to managers to ensure that we are stewarding tax dollars appropriately, and as Mr. Biggs said, right-sizing the federal government. The Biden administration prioritized sweetheart deals to the American Federation of Government Employees, and the American taxpayer suffered. There are more than 2 million civilians, non-postal employees. These employees were compensated just under $360 billion in 2023, up 31% from 2019. During this time, the federal workforce grew by more than 140,000 employees, an increase of over 7%. Spending on federal employees increased by billions of dollars, while there was little evidence of increases in services provided. The Biden administration saddled future generations with debt to award union allies. The American people suffered through an inflation crisis while federal bureaucrats were insulated from its effects and continued receiving pay increases. This was wrong and contributed to the American people overwhelmingly electing Republicans in 2024. Since taking office, President Trump has prioritized reining in the federal bureaucracy to save American taxpayers' money and ensure the federal government is effectively working for the American people. On April 24, 2025, President Trump issued Executive Order 14284, strengthening probationary periods in the federal service. The executive order states that the American people deserve a federal workforce that is high quality, efficient, dedicated to the public interest, and no larger than necessary. President Trump could not be more right. Probationary periods and trial periods are long-standing essential tools to ensure newly hired federal employees are sufficiently performing before their appointments are finalized permanently. I introduced the Equals Act of 2025 to build upon President Trump's executive order. The legislation provides 2-year probationary periods for competitive and accepted service employees instead of the current 1-year period for most employees after their initial appointment. This would allow for better tracking and monitoring of an employee's progress to ensure that they are the right fit for the federal government. This provision came directly from a 2015 GAO report entitled Improved Supervision and Better Use of Probationary Periods Are Needed to Address Substandard Employee Performance. The report from the GAO stated, Chief Human Capital Officers also told us supervisors often do not have enough time to adequately address an individual's performance before the probationary period ends. The report also found that individuals on a probationary period often rotate through various offices in the agency, and supervisors have only a limited opportunity to assess their performance. An employee can often work for the federal government for over 25 years, and having an extra year of probationary status to ensure the right employee becomes career tenured is a common sense good government measure. With that, I yield back.
So it's a pretty simple argument, okay? Once federal employees are hired, it's really hard to fire them once they've been there past their probationary period. And all Brandon Gill is proposing here is, hey, we've got to extend that from 1 year to 2 years. And what's the reasoning behind it? Because apparently these federal employees bounce around departments a lot. They don't get to know their supervisors don't get to know them. So therefore, it's really hard to actually get a measure of what type of employee this person is going to end up being. And by the way, a 2-year probationary period is not that uncommon. Here in my school district, all teachers have a 2-year probationary period. And of course, we get evaluated multiple times per year, every year after that. Okay, so this is not something that, of course, is going to be detrimental to attracting employees to federal work. And all of the arguments that Representative Lynch was making basically has to do more with pay than with oversight. Okay, because if a person gets hired for a job, of course, they're going to expect to be judged on how well they do. Okay, but if you want to attract good people into a position, then you have to give them a competitive wage. So yes, there is the danger of losing federal employees to the private sector, and the only way to really counteract that would be to pay them more as opposed to offering a little bit more oversight. And as we all remember, Donald Trump came in and laid off 200,000 federal employees. And let's be honest, how has your life been impacted by this? All right. Were some mistakes made? Yes. Were people hired back? Yes. But guess what? Has government kept functioning without all of those employees? And the answer, of course, is yes. I'm not aware at this point in time of any impacts that have been lasting from all of those layoffs because initially any problems that were had have been fixed. And by the way, in case you're not aware, the federal government is the largest employer in the United States, which to me is ridiculous, right? Over 3 million people work for the federal government. Amazon is in second place with basically half as much, 1.56 million people. All right. So how is the largest actual employer in America the federal government? What that tells me is that we're getting away from the initial intent of the founders of this nation, right? It sounds like the government, the federal government, is getting their fingers in all of the pies possible. And once those fingers are in those pies, it ain't good to eat. And if a little bit extra oversight is going to drive you away from a position, then you probably weren't a good fit for that position in the first place, because what in the world are you trying to hide? So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and say hi to your mom for me. Do you like t-shirts? Of course you do. And now you can support the channel by buying an Angry Teacher t-shirt designed by me, Angry Teacher. So if you like America, if you like freedom, if you like liberty, then go ahead and click the link in the description where all designs, of course, are 100% mother approved. So enjoy yourself and find something you like today.